Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Mad Max, Fury Road 2015 Movie Review. Mad Max, Fury Road is a 2015 Australian post-apocalyptic action film co-written, co-produced and directed by George Miller, who collaborated with Brendan McCarthy and Nico Lathouris on the screenplay. The fourth installment in the Mad Max franchise, it was produced by Village Roadshow Pictures and Kennedy Miller Mitchell, and distributed by Roadshow Entertainment in Australia and by Warner Brothers Pictures internationally. The film stars Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, with Nicholas Hoult, Hugh Keays-Byrne, in his final film role before his death in December 2020, Josh Hellman, Nathan Jones, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, Riley Keough, Zoë Kravitz, Abby Lee, and Courtney Eaton. Set in a post-apocalyptic desert wasteland where petrol and water are scarce commodities, it follows Max Rokitansky, Hardy, who joins forces with Imperator Furiosa, Theron, against warlord Immortan Joe, Keays-Byrne, and his army, leading to a lengthy road battle. Miller came up with the idea for Mad Max, Fury Road in 1987, but the film spent many years in development hell before pre-production began in 1998. Attempts to shoot the film in the 2000s were delayed numerous times due to the September 11 attacks, the Iraq War, and controversies surrounding star Mel Gibson, leading Miller to recast Gibson's role of Max Rokitansky. Miller decided to pursue the film again in 2007 after the release of his animated comedy film Happy Feet. In 2009, Miller announced that filming would begin in early 2011. Hardy was cast as Max in June 2010, with production planned to begin that November. Principal photography was delayed several more times before it actually began in July 2012. The film wrapped in December 2012, although additional footage was shot in November 2013. Mad Max, Fury Road premiered in Los Angeles on May 7, 2015, and was released in Australia on May 14. The film grossed $380.4 million at the worldwide box office, making it the highest-grossing Mad Max film. It was nominated for 10 awards at the 88th Academy Awards, winning 6 awards, and received numerous other accolades, including Best Film from the National Board of Review, 8 IACTA awards from 12 nominations including Best Film and Best Direction, and was also named one of the top 10 films of 2015 by the American Film Institute. It has also been called one of the greatest action films of all time. A prequel comic book series was published by Vertigo from May to August 2015. A prequel film, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was released on May 24, 2024, with Miller returning as writer and director. Max Rokitansky is captured by hydraulic despot cult leader Immortan Joe's war boys and taken to his fortress called the Citadel. Max, a universal donor, is forced to transfuse his blood to Nux, a sick war boy. Meanwhile, Joe sends his lieutenant Imperator Furiosa in the armored war rig to trade produce and water for petrol and ammunition with 2 of his allies, the Bullet Farmer and the People Eater. When Joe realizes his 5 wives are fleeing in the rig, he leads his entire army in pursuit, calling on his allies to help. Nux joins the pursuit with Max strapped to his car, and a chasing battle ensues. After entering enemy territory and fending off a rival gang, Furiosa drives into a dust-choked supercell and loses all of her pursuers except Nux, who attempts to sacrifice himself to blow up the rig. Max frees himself and restrains Nux, and Furiosa destroys Nux's car. After the sandstorm, Max catches Furiosa repairing the rig, accompanied by Joe's wives, Toast, Capable, Cheeto, the Dag, and Angharad, the latter 2 being pregnant with Joe's children. Max fights and subdues Furiosa, but her engine kill switch prevents him from stealing the rig. Max begrudgingly agrees to help Furiosa's group escape Joe's wrath. Nux sneaks onto the rig and attempts to kill Furiosa, but the women overpower him and throw Nux out. Nux rejoins Joe's army when it catches up. Furiosa drives through a canyon controlled by a biker gang, having pre-arranged to trade petrol for safe passage. The bikers betray her when they spot Joe's army approaching, forcing her to flee. The bikers detonate the canyon walls to block Joe and pursue the rig as Max and Furiosa fend them off. Joe drives over the blockade in a monster truck and catches up with the rig. He sends Nux to carjack the rig, but Nux stumbles and drops his weapon, to Joe's disgust. While helping Max, Angharad falls off the rig, and Joe fatally runs her over. Capable finds Nux hiding in the rig and consoles him. At night, Furiosa and Max drive through a swamp and get stuck in the mud. They slow Joe's forces with landmines, but the bullet farmer continues the pursuit in his ATV. Furiosa and Max work together to blind the bullet farmer and disable his ATV. Moved by Capable's compassion, Nux joins the group and helps get the rig moving again. In the morning, Furiosa tells Max that her group is escaping to a green place, the bountiful land where she grew up before being kidnapped and brought to the Citadel. She spots a green place watchtower and identifies herself to the woman at top who summons their matriarchal clan called the Vuvalini. The Vuvalini recognize Furiosa as one of their own but inform a devastated Furiosa that the green place was the now uninhabitable swamp from the previous night and that only 7 Vuvalini are left. The group decides to ride across an immense salt flat, hoping to find a new home on the other side. Max goes his own way. After seeing a vision of the child he was unable to save, Max catches up with the group and convinces them to return to the Citadel since they do not know what lies beyond the salt flat, but do know that the now undefended Citadel has ample water and crops. Joe intercepts them, and in the ensuing battle, 5 Vuvalini are killed, Toast is captured, and Furiosa is severely wounded. Joe overtakes the rig as they approach the canyon. While Max fights Joe's son and enforcer Rictus, Furiosa boards Joe's truck to rescue Toast, who distracts Joe, allowing Furiosa to kill him. The remnants of the group drive Joe's truck back to the Citadel, while Nux sacrifices himself by wrecking the rig to block the canyon behind them, killing Rictus. Max transfuses his blood to Furiosa, saving her life. Back at the Citadel, the people rejoice upon learning of Joe's death. As Max's companions are lifted to Joe's cliffside fortress, Max and Furiosa glance at each other before Max disappears into the crowd. Mad Max, Fury Road had a lengthy gestation period. In 1987, George Miller had the idea of making a Mad Max installment that was almost a continuous chase. He got an idea for the plot in 1998 when he was walking across a street in Los Angeles, and about a year later, while traveling from Los Angeles to Australia, a story in which violent marauders were fighting, not for oil or for material goods, but for human beings coalesced. Miller said he worked with 5 storyboard artists to design the film in storyboard form before writing the screenplay, producing about 3,500 panels, which is almost the same as the number of shots as in the finished film, as he wanted the film to be almost a continuous chase, with relatively little dialogue, and to have the visuals come first. The screenplay was written with Nico Lathouris and cult British comic creator Brendan McCarthy, who also designed many of the new characters and vehicles. The film entered pre-production at 20th Century Fox in the early 2000s and was set to star Mel Gibson, who had portrayed Max Rokitansky in the first 3 films in the series, with Sigourney Weaver contemplated for the female co-lead which would later become Imperator Furiosa, suggested by Gibson himself after they had worked together in Peter Weir's The Year of Living Dangerously, and Miller agreed on the idea. However, production was indefinitely postponed after the September 11 attacks in 2001 caused the American dollar against the Australian dollar, and our budget ballooned, as Miller has said in several interviews since the film was released in 2015, or due to security concerns and tightened travel and shipping restrictions during the lead-up to the Iraq War caused issues with the proposed Namibian shoot, as had been reported previously. In either event, Miller said he then had to commit to Happy Feet because we had the digital facility booked to do it, and by the time he got back to work on the Mad Max project 4 years later, Gibson had all that turbulence in his life. Both Miller and Gibson himself said the passage of time had made Gibson's age a factor, since the film wasn't about an old road warrior. In 2006, Miller said he was thinking about making Fury Road without Gibson. He confirmed his intention to make another Mad Max film in 2007 and stated that he thought Gibson was focused on his own films and was also too old to play the part. On March 5, 2009, it was announced that an R-rated animated feature film inspired by Japanese anime, but adapted for Western audiences, was in pre-production that would be taking much of the plot from Fury Road and would not feature Gibson's voice. Miller was also developing an action-adventure tie-in video game based on the fourth film with God of War 2 designer Cory Barlog. Both projects were expected to take 2 to 2.5 years and, according to Miller, would be released in 2011 or 2012. The animated Fury Road was going to be produced by Dr. D Studios, a digital art studio founded in 2008 by Miller and Doug Mitchell. On May 18, 2009, it was reported that location scouting was underway for Fury Road, which could go into production later this year. Miller had decided to shoot a live-action film after all, and already had the various vehicles built for years now, as they were built for the doomed Fury Road shoot. By this time, the project had moved from Fox to Warner Brothers. In October, Miller announced that principal photography on Fury Road would commence at Broken Hill, New South Wales in August 2010. That same month, British actor Tom Hardy was in negotiations to take the lead role of Max, and it was also announced that Charlize Theron would play a major role. The finalists for the part of Max were Hardy, Armie Hammer, and Jeremy Renner, with Michael Fassbender, Joel Kinnaman, Heath Ledger, Eric Bana, and Eminem, who did not wish to leave the United States, all having been considered at various stages of the film's extended development. Hardy announced he had been cast on Friday Night with Jonathan Ross in June 2010. In July 2010, Miller announced plans to shoot 2 Mad Max films back-to-back, entitled Mad Max, Fury Road and Mad Max, Furiosa. Weta Digital was involved with the film when it was scheduled for a 2012 release. The company was to handle visual effects until production was postponed from its November 2010 start date. Specialty physical effects house Weta Workshop provided conceptual designs, early character look development, prototyping, and specialty makeup effects. After unexpected heavy rains caused wildflowers to grow in the desert around Broken Hill, filming was moved from Broken Hill back to Namibia in November 2011. Other potential locations scouted included the Atacama Desert in Chile, Shot El Jared in Tunisia, and Azerbaijan. Miller said he did not feel he had to top the production design of the previous films in the series. Instead, he wanted the design to harken back to the earlier films and reflect the changes of the past 30 years. Colin Gibson, the production designer, said the filmmakers developed an internally consistent history to explain the film's look and justify its use of hot rods. He designed the vehicles in the film, some of which were constructed as early as 2003, and all of which were fully functional. Of the 150 vehicles constructed, only 88 survived to the end of filming, with the others built to facilitate their intended method of destruction. The War Rig, the film's most prominent vehicle, was made by combining a Tatra 815 and Chevrolet Fleetmaster and fusing a Volkswagen Beetle to the hull, among other modifications. The cars were designed with an emphasis on detail and characterization. An effort was made to show the various characters' attempts to recycle the remains of civilization and their feelings of guilt and loss. Cinematographer John Seale came out of retirement to shoot Fury Road, replacing Dean Semler, the cinematographer of the previous 2 Mad Max films, who left the film near the end of its preparation period. It was the first project Seale filmed with digital cameras. He outfitted his crew with 6 ARRI Alexa Pluses and 4 Alexa MS, as well as a number of Canon EOS 5DS and Olympus Pen EP5S that were used as crash cams for the action sequences. As the Canon cameras were simple consumer-grade ones, when one would break, the crew would simply source new ones locally from an airport store. Because of the fast-paced editing style Miller intended for the film, He asked Seal to keep the point of interest of each shot in the center of the frame so the audience did not have to search for it. Principal photography began in July 2012 in Namibia, with most of the filming based in the Durban National Park. Some scenes were also shot at the Cape Town Film Studios in Cape Town, South Africa. In October 2012, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Warner Brothers sent an executive to Namibia to keep the production on track. Filming wrapped on December 8, 2012, although the opening and closing scenes at the Citadel had still not been shot. A draft report from the Namibian Coast Conservation and Management Project that accused the producers of damaging parts of the Namib Desert, endangering a number of plant and animal species, was leaked in February 2013. The Namibia Film Commission said it had no reservations after visiting the set during production and disputed claims reported in the media, calling the accusations unjust rhetoric. Filming went over budget and producers forced the film to wrap before any of the Citadel scenes had been shot. A change of leadership at Warner Brothers later allowed production to continue and the missing scenes be filmed. In September 2013, it was announced that the film would add pickups of the opening and closing scenes at the Citadel. Filming continued on November 22, 2013 at Potts Hill and Penrith Lakes in Western Sydney, and concluded in December 2013 at Fox Studios Australia. Miller invited playwright Eve Ensler to act as an on-set advisor. Impressed with the script's depth and what she saw as feminist themes, she spent a week in Namibia, where she spoke to the actors about issues of violence against women. According to Miller, 90% of the effects in the film were achieved practically. Both the Doofwagon and the Doof Warrior's guitar are fully functional, and none of his scenes were rendered using CGI even when the guitar shoots fire. Second unit director and supervising stunt coordinator Guy Norris was in charge of over 150 stunt performers, some of whom were from Cirque du Soleil. Hardy later said he had a hard time seeing Miller's vision during production, which frustrated him. He understood after seeing the finished film, however, and started his con-press briefing with a lengthy apology to Miller, calling the director brilliant. Theron and Hardy clashed on set during filming. Hardy would show up late to set frequently, disrupting the shooting schedule. Miller recruited his wife, Margaret Sixel, to edit the film, as he felt she could make it stand out from other action films. Sixel had 480 hours of footage to edit, which took 3 months to watch. The film contains about 2,700 cuts in 120 minutes, or 22.5 cuts per minute, compared to Mad Max 2's 1,200 cuts in 90 minutes, or 13.33 cuts per minute. According to Seal, something like 50 or 60% of the film is not running at 24 frames a second, which is the traditional frame rate. It'll be running below 24 frames because George, if he couldn't understand what was happening in the shot, he slowed it down until you could. Or if it was too well understood, he'd shorten it or he'd speed it up back towards 24. His manipulation of every shot in that movie is intense. The Washington Post noted that the changing frame rate gives the film an almost cartoonishly jerky look. The film contains 2,000 visual effects shots. The lead effects company was Elora, which produced more than 1,500 effects shots for the film. Additional visual effects studios that worked on the film include Method Studios, Brave New World VFX, Stereo D, 4D Max, Black Ginger, The Third Floor, and Dr. D Studios. The effects work included altering lighting and time of day, weather effects, terrain replacement, and plate composition. Sound designer Mark Mangini stated that he viewed the war rig as an allegory for Moby Dick, with Immortan Joe playing the role of Captain Ahab. As such, the mechanical truck sounds of the rig were layered with whale calls to provide a more animal-like quality, and when the tank is pierced with harpoons and milk sprays out, sounds of whales breathing from their blowholes were incorporated. For the final destruction of the war rig, the only sounds used were slowed-down bear growls to symbolize the death of the truck as a living creature. Although Miller was contractually obligated to deliver a PG-13 film, Warner Brothers decided to hold test screenings for two different versions, a studio cut and a Miller cut. The Miller cut tested better than the studio cut, so Warner Brothers decided to release the film with an R rating. Miller had originally planned to shoot the film in native 3D, but this idea was eventually scrapped, due to both budgetary concerns and doubts that the 3D cameras could withstand the tough desert filming conditions and extensive stunt work, and it was converted to 3D in post-production instead. The musical score for Mad Max, Fury Road was written by the Dutch composer Junkie XL. Prior to his involvement, Hans Zimmer, John Powell, and Marco Beltrami were attached at separate times to score the film. A soundtrack album was released by Watertower Music on 12 May 2015. Miller described the film's key theme as survival, which he said it has in common with the American westerns that were such a staple for the better part of a century in American cinema, while several critics wrote that the primary theme of Mad Max, Fury Road is the attempt to retain humanity in the face of apocalyptic events. Max begins the film as a survivor haunted by visions of deceased people and recovers his humanity by partnering with Furiosa. Feminism is another theme that has received academic attention. Charlize Theron as Furiosa is the dramatic center of the film. Throughout, Furiosa demonstrates the physicality of a hero committed to a rescue mission that sets up the start of a matriarchy as an antidote to the barbarian, warlike tribes that came before. These elements contrast this film with the male-centered stories of the previous Mad Max films. Some literary scholars identified disability as a theme of the film, predominantly due to Furiosa's prosthetic arm. Immortan Joe also deals with disabilities, but is obsessed with able-bodiedness, and is the antithesis to Furiosa's pro-disablism. The film has been praised by disability scholars for its inclusion and treatment of disabled people. Miller described the film as a very simple allegory, almost a western on wheels. Further themes pointed out by critics include vengeance, solidarity, home, and redemption. Home dominates the motivations of Max, Furiosa, and the five wives. Max's home was destroyed, Furiosa was taken from her home, and the wives are in search of a new home to raise their children. The unity of these characters harnesses a concern for family, which is a common theme in Miller's films, Happy Feet 2 and Babe, Pig in the City. Themes of ecological collapse and moral decadence are also present in the film. In May 2015, Vertigo Comics began publishing a comic book prequel limited series consisting of 4 issues, with each issue focusing on the backstory of one or two of the film's characters. The first issue, titled Mad Max, Fury Road, Nux and Immortan Joe No. 1, was released on May 20. The second, Mad Max, Fury Road, Furiosa No. 1, was released on June 17. The third, Mad Max, Fury Road, Mad Max No. 1, was released on July 8, and the fourth, Mad Max, Fury Road, Mad Max No. 2, was released on August 5. A deluxe edition hardcover collection of art inspired by the film, titled Mad Max, Fury Road, Inspired Artists Deluxe Edition, was released by Vertigo on May 6. The film had its world premiere at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on May 7, 2015. It screened out of competition at the 68th Cannes Film Festival on 14 May, and it was theatrically released in the United States the next day. Miller said the Blu-ray disc release of the film would include black and white and silent versions of the film, with the latter accompanied by the musical score, and described the black and white cut as the best version. However, when details for the initial UK and US releases of the Blu-ray were announced, the alternate cuts were missing. The film was released on both 3D and standard Blu-ray as well as DVD in the UK on October 5, 2015. In the US, it was released digitally on August 11, 2015, and physically on September 1. In addition to the standalone release, a box set containing all 4 Mad Max films and a documentary about the series titled The Madness of Max was released the same day. Producer Doug Mitchell confirmed in December 2015 that the black and white version of the film existed and could potentially see a future theatrical release. In January 2016, Miller announced that the black and white version would appear on a later DVD release, and it debuted as part of the Mad Max High Octane anthology released in October 2016, with the black and white version of Fury Road called the Black and Chrome Edition. The Black and Chrome Edition was made without the involvement of cinematographer John Seale, but Seale said the idea was beautifully dramatic and he thought the new version will emphasize the actors' performances. Home media editions of Mad Max Fury Road were among the top-selling video titles in the US in 2015 and 2016. As of 2024, over 3 million copies have been sold, for a total revenue of $56.9 million. Mad Max Fury Road grossed $154.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $226.1 million in other countries, for a worldwide total of $380.4 million against a production budget of $154.6 to $185.1 million. It was the 21st highest grossing film of 2015. Although the film made a gross profit, The Hollywood Reporter calculated that the net loss incurred by the film was around $20 to $40 million. In the United States and Canada, the film was released in 3,702 theaters the same weekend as Pitch Perfect 2. It earned $16.77 million its opening day, which included $3.7 million from Thursday night screenings at 3,000 theaters. The film grossed $45.4 million its opening weekend, finishing in second at the box office behind Pitch Perfect 2, $69.2 million. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 97% of 439 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 8.60/10. The website's critics' consensus reads, with exhilarating action and a surprising amount of narrative heft, Mad Max Fury Road brings George Miller's post-apocalyptic franchise roaring vigorously back to life. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 90 out of 100, based on 51 critics, indicating universal acclaim. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale. Robbie Collin of the Daily Telegraph gave the film a full 5 out of 5 and praised its acting, screenplay, choreography, stunts, humor, and direction, describing it as a Krakatoan eruption of craziness. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian awarded it 4 out of 5 and wrote that it is extravagantly deranged, ear-splittingly cacophonous, and entirely over the top, a bizarre convoy chase action thriller in the post-apocalyptic desert. Lindsay Barr of the Associated Press described the film as radically visionary. Robert W. Butler of the Kansas City Star gave the film a scoring of 3 out of 4, saying, "A mind-boggling exercise in pure action. Mad Max Fury Road is overwhelming, achieving the sort of visual poetry typically ascribed to Ben-Hur's Chariot Race or one of Sam Peckinpah's Blood Ballets." IGN reviewer Scott Kalura gave the film 9.2 out of 10, writing, "The over-the-top stunts and eccentric characters and designs are all hugely important to Fury Road, as are the troubled figures like Max himself and Furiosa, but it's the overriding sense of the film's uniqueness, its striving to be something more than just another action movie, that is most impressive." Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 4 out of 4 and wrote that Theron and Hardy are one of the best action duos ever, in one of the best action movies. Similarly, Rolling Stone's Peter Travers called the film a new action classic, and gave particular praise to its editing, costumes, and soundtrack. Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle wrote a mixed review, praising the cinematography and Theron's performance, but describing the film as a long, dull chase. The film has been praised by scholars on several fronts. Women's studies scholars have praised the dominant role taken by Furiosa and the range of atypical female roles, including the wives and the gun-toting Vuvolini, and disability studies scholars have commended its positive, non-stigmatizing portrayals of physical and psychological disabilities. At the 88th Academy Awards, Mad Max Fury Road received nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Visual Effects, and won Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hair Styling, Best Sound Mixing and Best Sound Editing. Its 6 awards were more than any other film at that year's ceremony and set a new record for the most wins by an Australian film. The film's other nominations include 7 British Academy Film Awards, winning 4, 13 Critics' Choice Movie Awards, winning 9, and 2 Golden Globe Awards. It won Best Film at the National Board of Review Awards 2015, and was named one of the 10 best films of 2015 by the American Film Institute. Listed on over 170 film critics' top 10 lists for 2015, including 58 first-place rankings and 26 second-place rankings, the film topped Metacritic's tally of film critics' year-end best film lists, and it was also named Rotten Tomatoes' best-scoring film of 2015. A 2016 BBC poll of 177 film critics listed Mad Max: Fury Road as the 19th best film of the 21st century, and the New York Times placed it 19th on its own list. Empire and The Independent respectively named it first and 19th best in 2020. The film's screenplay was listed number 68 on the Writers Guild of America's 101 Greatest Screenplays of the 21st Century, so far, in 2021. The February 2020 issue of New York Magazine lists Mad Max: Fury Road as among the best movies that lost Best Picture at the Oscars. In addition, several critics considered Fury Road to be one of the greatest action films ever made. While it appeared on numerous Best Films of the Decade lists, it was ranked first on the AV Club Critics' The 100 Best Movies of the 2010s, third on Variety's The Best Films of the Decade, and ninth on The Hollywood Reporter's The 10 Best Films of the Decade. It also appeared, unranked, on the New York Times' The 10 Most Influential Films of the Decade, and 20 other favorites, Wired's The 24 Absolute Best Movies of the 2010s, and the Los Angeles Times' The Best Movies of the Decade, Kenneth Turan and Justin Chang's Essential Picks. In Metacritic's tally of lists of the best films of the decade, Fury Road topped more lists than any other film, with 20 critics placing it at number 1. In 2025, the film ranked number 11 on the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, and number 7 on Rolling Stone's equivalent. During the writing process for Fury Road in 2011, Miller and McCarthy found that they had enough story material for 2 additional scripts. Miller told Wired in May 2015 that if the film became successful, he would tell the other 2 stories. In November 2017, it was reported that a lawsuit filed by Miller's production company against Warner Brothers over a disputed $7 million bonus was likely to delay the production of any further Mad Max films. However, the legal dispute was resolved in 2019 or 2020, enabling pre-production to move forward. In October 2020, a prequel to Fury Road, titled Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga, entered advanced development at Warner Brothers, in collaboration with Miller and Mitchell under their Kennedy Miller-Mitchell banner. Miller directed the film and co-wrote the screenplay with Nico Lathouris. Anya Taylor-Joy portrayed a young Furiosa, Chris Hemsworth portrayed her nemesis Dementus, and Tom Burke portrayed her mentor Jack. In addition, Jacob Tamuri, Tom Hardy's stuntman in Fury Road, had a cameo appearance as Max Rokitansky, and Josh Hellman and Brian Probitz portrayed Scabrous Scrotus and Chumbucket, characters created for the 2015 Mad Max video game, set between Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and Fury Road. The film was released on May 24, 2024. In March 2015, during an interview with Esquire, Hardy revealed that he was attached to star in 3 more Mad Max films following Fury Road. In July 2019, Miller told IndieWire that 3 films were being considered, 2 Mad Max stories and a Furiosa story, the latter of which was eventually produced first. In May 2015, Miller revealed that one of these proposed films would be titled Mad Max: The Wasteland, although he clarified that The Wasteland was a working title. The Wasteland is another Fury Road prequel that would trace Max's travels in the Wasteland in the year preceding his capture by Immortan Joe's forces at the start of Fury Road. Following the release of Furiosa, The Hollywood Reporter clarified that the Wasteland was not yet in development. In June 2024, Hardy, while promoting The Bike Riders, said in an interview that, "I don't think happening." In February 2025, Miller expressed further interest in making The Wasteland despite Furiosa underperforming, though he wished to commit to other projects first, saying is not something I would do next, because there's two things I'm keen to do next. But if for whatever reason the planets align, you can never tell. Too often, you're lining up to do a movie and then something happens. Some things fall into place and some don't, so all I can say is we'll see. Has it really been 30 years since Mel Gibson last drove across George Miller's dystopian desert wasteland in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome? My, how time flies. Between 1979 and 1985, visionary filmmaker Miller gave us three films: the intriguing but lethargic Mad Max, the fabulous cult classic The Road Warrior, and the fun but commercial Beyond Thunderdome. While the second film was the real standout, I have always had a natural soft spot for the entire franchise. So of course I would be enthusiastic when it was announced that a fourth installment was finally seeing the light of day. For years Miller has toyed with the idea of bringing Max back to the big screen, but there were always obstacles that hindered him. Mel Gibson was set to reprise his role, and at several points the project seemed good to go. Several years have passed, Tom Hardy replaces the aged Gibson, and Fury Road is a reality. What's truly amazing is that this is the wildest, craziest, and most visually arresting installment yet, and all from the mind of its now 70-year-old creator. The first three films had a combined budget of less than $20 million. For Fury Road, Miller was given $150 million, and you will instantly see the benefits. The visuals are an essential component to this film. This is an unapologetic, full-throttle thrill ride, and a textbook lesson on how to make an action movie. Make no mistake, the action in Fury Road is intense and relentless. The vehicular carnage is unlike anything most people have seen before. The story is a bit lightweight and clearly intended to serve the plot's madness. This all may be enough to scare away some people. For me, it was the film's unflinching, fuel-injected focus that made it the best movie experience I've had this year so far. The film opens with a gruff Hardy saying, "My name is Max. My world is fire and blood." His world is an energy-starved, post-apocalyptic desert wasteland where he is haunted by his past and driven only by survival. Within the first few minutes, the nomadic Max is captured by the army of a savage and wickedly grotesque tyrant named Immortan Joe, Hugh Keays-Byrne. Max's capture leads him to cross paths with Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, who attempts to smuggle Joe's 5 enslaved childbearing wives to safety. This invokes the wrath of the maniacal leader, who brings his entire army after them. And guess what? Max is caught right in the middle. I can't think of a more fitting actor to take on the role of Mad Max than Tom Hardy. His dialogue is sparse and he mainly tells his story through grunts, expressions, and outright physicality. And he does it all to sheer perfection. It's a very unorthodox role. He's not asked to say much, and he spends a good third of the movie with his face partially obscured by a metal contraption. But he masterfully sells us this tough, surly, and untrusting Max character. But the real surprise was watching Charlize Theron match his toughness punch for punch and bullet for bullet. She is so good here. But of course the true star and the main attraction is George Miller and his insanely energetic action and presentation. Fury Road is a visual delight, a movie filled with wow moments, unbelievable stunts, and mind-blowing vehicle action sequences. Miller shoots his action with a chaotic precision and cinematic fluidity. Many modern action directors should take notes. But equally impressive are the stunning amount of practical effects used. When mixed with the top-notch CGI, it makes this one amazing-looking film. And going along with the stellar visuals is Junkie XL's vibrant and invigorating score. Some of us had given up on Mad Max ever returning to the big screen. After 30 years it was a reasonable conclusion. But after seeing Fury Road I can boldly say it was worth the wait. George Miller has given us an installment that stands right there with, and probably an inch or two above, his phenomenal The Road Warrior. This is pure action cinema, a beautiful mixture of old school style and modern movie technology. And after this taste of Miller's vision, I can only hope he has more Mad Max movies planned for the future. Let's just say what this film is. We saw from TV and the trailers in theaters, and we can all say, Fury Road is a reboot of George Miller's beloved franchise, but surprisingly directed by Miller. I have never seen a reboot of a film directed by the original movie's director before until now. Fury Road is literally a Fast and Furious movie. Not saying that it's a film similar to the Fast and Furious franchise, but the film is very hyperviolent and fueled with adrenaline and also has a really fast pace. As in, it feels as the editor cranked the movie's speed from 1 to 1.5, which may be off-putting to people, but in a film as crazy as this it works. What's fascinating about this film is that it plays like a 70s movie. There is a lot of fade to blacks with a big orchestra in the background, which is very nostalgic to the old audience. Everything in Fury Road feels like it was created with passion, and nobody knows crazy like George Miller. When you think Miller hit his creative peak with Happy Feet, he proves that as you age you can still reinvent your own franchise as long as you maintain originality. Most of the things in the film make absolutely no sense, but everything story-wise does. The film features henchmen that are driving cars playing electric guitar and drums into battle. The film may be called Mad Max, but the hero of this film isn't Hardy as Max, but is really Theron as Imperator Furiosa and the ragtag group of females she's accompanied by. The real heroes of this film are women, and they all serve purpose to the story that's really thought-provoking. Oh yeah, this film even subtly shouts at some humanitarian messages. Personally, this is the best feminist action film I've ever seen, and believe me, there's not that much, where you have ultra-violent action films like Sucker Punch that features an abundant amount of female actress that are written poorly, which makes the film come off being obnoxiously misogynistic. Miller literally gives his main character a backseat and hands the wheel to the women, writing each character with great detail and different personalities. Don't get me wrong, Max is still a good character with a lot of depth, but it's really good to have the women kick the most ass. There's even very emotional and heartfelt moments in the movie, so by the time it ends you're most likely to catch more feels than you did with Quicksilver in Age of Ultron. What's even more amazing about Fury Road isn't only just the badass action sequences that are choreographed fantastically, but is the gorgeous cinematography and art design of the Aussie outback. There are epic sequences that involves tornadoes, canyons, and even just plain vast desert, and Miller manages to make all of the different set pieces beautiful in their own way. When I saw the trailer for Mad Max Fury Road, I was positive it would be one I couldn't see. I don't like violent films, and it looked like a gory, violent mess. However, I always go through my process I describe for evaluating movie content in How to Be Mormon and Like Movies. I look at reviews, the detailed content summaries on screenit.com, and I ask friends who have seen the movie. To my surprise, I found it to have virtually no profanity and to not be as violent as I anticipated. It is an R, but most of that is more battle-like violence, some nudity, and vehicular battles. Convinced it was within my comfort level, I decided to go check it out. It's a very tricky movie to review because it does what it is trying to do masterfully well. I don't know how that can be debated. Whether such a masterwork is your cup of tea is another question. It's certainly not a movie I will be frequently rewatching, but I did think it was good and engaged me more than I would have guessed. All in all, it is a success, and I can see why many people love it. I have not seen the original Mad Max movies because I always figured they were too violent, so perhaps I will give them a watch. This Mad Max doesn't have much of plot. It's one action sequence after another. It does not try to have symbolism or a puzzle like a Nolan film might have. It doesn't have a strong lead character like a Bond film. The title is perhaps a misnomer because Mad Max has only a few lines of dialogue and is an ensemble player with Charlize Theron and others. Basically the plot that does exist starts out with setting. It is a desert post-apocalyptic world that is ruled by a man named the Immortan Joe. Max has been arrested and is forced to be a blood bag for a war boy played by Nicholas Hoult. Charlize Theron is Furiosa, who abducts 5 of Joe's wives called the Breeders. The rest of the movie is Max, Furiosa, and crew getting chased by Joe and having intense battles with each other. Each of the cars is so imaginative, with one even being a giant speaker system with a guy playing an electric guitar. There are cars that have long poles for people to swing onto other cars. There are rigs with gasoline and others covered in spikes. It keeps the action exciting because you don't know how the cars work and how the fight will play out. For not speaking much, Tom Hardy is good as Mad Max. But the movie doesn't give you a lot of time to contemplate his character. I can't even imagine how awful it must be to shoot a movie like this with all the dust and dirt, but he is convincing as the stoic anti-hero. The CG is kept to a minimum and it at least appears to have a lot of practical effects. The stunt work is flawless. I wonder how much Hardy and others did of their own stunts. Whatever the percentage is by professionals, you definitely can't tell. It feels earthy and real, which we haven't seen in an action film in a long time. I loved how Mad Max handled its female characters. It reminds me a little bit of Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow. These are not cliched warrior women or damsels in distress. Even the breeder women are relatively complex, especially for this kind of movie. Charlize Theron is amazing. She is tough but has heart, and there is a moment that is completely devastating for her and she sells it. There are different kind of women: old women, young women, pregnant women, and they all defy female tropes. The last thing I expected in a movie like this is an awesome group of women, and it definitely helped sell me on the film. Hugh Keays-Byrne is good as the villain Immortan Joe, but most of that credit has to go to his costume and mask. There is such attention to detail. The amount of time that must have been spent to get teeth right, skin layered and dry, lips cracked, everything covered in dust is mind-blowing. The makeup on the war boys, including Nicholas Hoult, is very convincing. They are brainwashed to believe if they are obedient servants to Joe they will achieve immortality at the gates of heaven. Mad Max Fury Road is not a movie that gives the audience much time to breathe. There is very little dialogue and I did feel kind of exhausted by the end of it. But then again, I feel like it was trying to do something completely different and new, and from a comic book guy like George Miller it makes sense. It is primarily a visual spectacle. Still, it pushed me to my limit of apocalyptic car battle sequences. Who knew I had such a limit? I'm a little surprised it is so universally loved, because I would think a few people might be bothered by the thin plot and lack of character development. I guess they just accept it for what it is, a new dazzling creative vision of what a war movie looks like. After all, do we complain that the villains in a WW2 movie aren't fleshed out enough? Do we want more dialogue in our John Wayne war movie? No. Same with this. It is visually incredible and the action is immersive enough to carry the day. Like I said, the women put it over the hump for me to a strong recommendation. It was such a pleasant surprise, and I bet you could see the movie and not even notice most of the women. They are just characters in the movie like anybody else. It looks gorgeous. The action sequences are stunning and I was entertained. As far as content, it has some nudity from a distance and women are milked like cows in one brief shot. Characters are stabbed, impaled, tortured, and shot in the battle scenes. Another you see briefly has his face ripped off from a mask. A lot of crashes, explosions and sandstorms that are intense. A woman has a C-section mostly off-screen and an N4 is seen being inserted. I know it sounds crazy, but it's actually more tame than you might think. No language. Mostly it is a lot of cars and broad fighting like a battle, than one-on-one violence like you might get in a horror movie. A confession from the outset, I've never seen a Mad Max movie. It's one of those franchises I just haven't managed to catch up on. My excitement for Fury Road, however, escalated with each and every poster and trailer released. It reached that point where I needed to talk down the film for myself to stave disappointment. I needn't have bothered. The film was more than I possibly could have hoped for. Both an extraordinary feat of action choreography and world design, and an effective and unpretentious narrative, Fury Road is, I feel safe to say, truly a modern masterpiece. The world has become a desert. A traumatized man, Max Rokitansky, Tom Hardy, is pursued and captured by the war boys, servants of the despot Immortan Joe, Hugh Keaysburn, to be used as a permanent blood donor. Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, goes off course while leading a supply convoy for Joe. She has taken Joe's breeders, a group of 5 women forced into marriage and pregnancy, and plans on returning with them to her childhood home, the Green Place. The feeble but determined warboy Nux, Nicholas Hoult, is circulating his blood with Max when he leads the charge after Furiosa, where Max escapes. Max joins forces with the women and together they seek an escape from Immortan Joe, encountering friend and foe as they traverse the desert in search of the Green Place, and with it, a sense of hope. Fury Road begins with a relentless, 30-minute action sequence which elicited the first round of applause from the enthusiastic early risers in Cannes. This screening began at 8:30 a.m., and having been awake since 5:30 a.m., without coffee. That 30 minutes certainly ensured my rapt, and fully awake, attention for the next 90. This is a pure action film, in reality it's just one, long chase sequence, but it makes the most of its short sequences of character and story development. Max is monosyllabic from the outset, frozen by an unexplained but frequently alluded to sense of guilt. Furiosa initially seems to be a typically 2D kick-ass woman, but soon emerges as a nuanced and subtle character, longing to escape back to her home and determined to do all she can to protect the women Joe considers property. These women, the splendid Angharad, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, Toast the Knowing, Zoë Kravitz, Capable, Riley Keough, The Dag, Abby Lee, and Cheeto, Courtney Eaton, are all developed as individuals who are bound by their terrible fate. They are brave, resourceful, loyal, kind and, importantly, fallible, and so much more than just quarry or a plot device. Nux has perhaps the fullest development arc, moving from fanatical disciple to free-thinking hero over the course of the film. The performances are all-round excellent here with perhaps Hoult, Theron, and Kravitz standing out most, but not by far, for me. Why not Hardy, as the film's titular character? Well, the most surprising aspect of the film is the extent to which it is really not at all about Max. He's our protagonist but his narrative is peripheral, even inconsequential, to the narrative of the band of people he joins. This is no criticism, however, and this allows for a really enriched story. Fury Road, attentive though it is to character, is, of course, first and foremost a pure visual spectacle. Its bright yellow and orange desert, rendered blue at night, is a stark backdrop to its vehicular mayhem. The film revels in its carnage, with metal flying all over the screen, as a result of the elements, more metal, or other human means of destruction. The designs of the different vehicles are inventive and serve the ambitious action scenes without ever seeming gratuitous. The choreography of the scenes is balletic, and the attention to detail extends to the characters too. The costumes and makeup are wonderful, and the hand-to-hand action riveting. Some sequences in the end are genuinely breathtaking, requiring huge gulps of air along with the rapturous applause. It's recently become apparent that this film has been pissing off men's rights activists. Good. I'm glad. It exposes how utterly ridiculous their stance and causes that one of the best action films of all time can be ruined because it is primarily about women. Fury Road is about a lot of things, really: guilt, redemption, fanaticism, hell, even the environment, but that it's also about women is a massive strength of the film. This isn't just a film with one woman doing her token lady things in a broader narrative, this is a narrative about women and men fighting for their right to be free. That so much of this is done via women, and in particular women's right to bodily autonomy, there's one particularly unexpected and distressing, but topical, scene, made it so much more powerful for me. And I don't think that's because I'm a woman, I think it's because we so rarely get to see that on a big screen, with a big budget and in a genre film. If I could ever express to George Miller my gratitude for that, I'd be even happier. I find it difficult to imagine another film leaving me literally breathless and struggling for words at its end, this year, or any time soon. The last film that did that to me was Martyrs, and though for very different reasons, I find it a very certain marker of the extent to which a film has moved and impressed me. Films like Mad Max, Fury Road showcase cinema at its absolute finest. It should be watched on the biggest screen possible, on the best sound systems, and treasured for its artistry, power, and sheer joy. The movie succeeds mostly for the technical aspects and the action. Action sequences here are for once genuinely well filmed and well executed. And they are, what a surprise, actually engaging and very entertaining. Action here is filmed very smartly with some excellent movements and camera angles, thus helping you see the whole thing properly and not missing anything. That was great about it. And although there was too much of it in the first half, all of the action in the film is spectacular, wonderfully realized, always involving and accompanied with a sense of danger and consequences. What I also liked a lot in Mad Max, Fury Road is definitely the tone. It is amazing. The approach is very intriguing here, as it sometimes seems realistic, or somewhat realistic, but it then compensates for it with a bunch of really crazy and weird stuff thrown at you. I am of course talking about the crazy vehicles, the odd musician, and the overall crazy attitude and behavior from its characters. Yes, none of the characters here is sane, but that is not a bad thing for sure, as the movie is certainly positively crazy and just rarely pushing the boundaries. Yes, there are some too violent and disgusting moments, but there aren't many of those, which I was thankful for. But overall that tone is great, as it is mostly serious with deadly circumstances and action, but once in a while there comes the humor, which is very interesting, weird, crazy, and definitely good, as it made me laugh a couple of times. Speaking of those vehicles, the world building here is absolutely terrific. Everything is so well conceived and depicted, wonderfully imagined with excellent attention to detail. Everything about it technically is a pure miracle. The cinematography is ridiculously good with great camera movements, as mentioned before. The scenery is beautiful and really pleasing to the eye, with even the dark imagery in night scenes really well filmed. The colors are very appealing and a great choice, from orange in daylight to blue during night. If there is one thing I did not like is 3D as I watched the film in the theater. It is weak and failed to capture the wonder of the screen, which is a shame, as it had a lot of potential. However, there were about 3 moments where the object, a bullet for instance, passed right back at the audience, and that was great, as it literally went into my eye. I also have to congratulate them for the score, as it's so powerful. This is the kind of score and sound effects that accompany the action on the screen, builds the tension, and wonderfully contributes to the overall enjoyment of the action. The dialogue is okay, but not the greatest, and the directing from George Miller is very good. I also like how the film, although in this usually stupid genre, still manages to have both heart and brain, as it has some warm moments and it makes you care for the characters while also having the necessary realism, some political overtones and deadly consequences. The movie is way too predictable at times, and that is definitely a flaw, as I literally predicted some plot points early on. But the editing is deft with pacing, not always fast, and thankfully with some warm and calm moments. And there are a couple of instantly recognizable and memorable moments here that will probably go down into history, how good they are executed. And overall, Mad Max, Fury Road is not original, but it is incredibly authentic both in its themes and its execution. And of course in that wonderful look. Until now, I complimented this movie a lot, and because I give it a 4, there are many things here that bothered me, and those are essentially the problems every action movie has: weak story and so-so character development. Yes, the story is very weak. It has some great themes, especially of feminism and the relationship between the sexes, but those themes just become overtones as they are never properly explored. Although intriguing, they just are left for the action to occur. And also I was not a fan of that beginning, and almost half of the whole first half just started abruptly and never explaining you the story or the characters. The world building, as I mentioned earlier, is so good, but it is unfortunate that we never learn anything about this world or the political intrigue brewing beneath. The characters are so underdeveloped that it hurts the movie. Nux is very sympathetic as this odd lunatic, but the villain Immortal Joe really didn't get anything to do in this movie, which was ridiculous as they built him up so much. Also, all of the girls and the rest of the people never get much to do and never get much development. As for Max and Furiosa, they are of course the standouts as this incredibly strong team of leads. They are both instantly likable and you want to follow them wherever they go. And they both got some warm moments, and the ending with them nodding to each other is so powerful. But even those two never got any backstory, as there are many things left unanswered regarding the two. And the acting. It is very good, in some instances quite remarkable. Nicholas Hoult is so good as crazy but so likable Nux, and this is probably his finest performance yet in my opinion. And Charlize Theron is absolutely incredible. She became Furiosa, which was so hard as this role is incredibly difficult and demanding, both emotionally and physically. But she managed to pull it off and created one of the very best female action heroes of all time. As for Tom Hardy, I was once again angry how he never showed his face in the beginning, but thankfully he did later on. And once again his talk is too brutal and too much like that of Bane, which was unnecessary. Also, I never really bought him that much in this role, as he has such an innocent face and especially the look in his eyes, which distracted me as he was supposed to be one of the craziest persons in the movie. But although those things bothered me, he still did a great job, as he is one of the better actors working today. Yes. This is what movies are meant to be like. I've been moaning for years that they can't make a decent action blockbuster anymore. It's all CGI bullshit now with shitty scripts and crappy characters. Oh, how I've longed for the days of the Terminator and Alien/Aliens. Well, I'm happy to say that Mad Max, Fury Road is a return to the good old days of action-packed blockbusters. And, as a huge added bonus, we have ourselves another Ellen Ripley with Charlize Theron's kick-ass Imperator Furiosa. That's right, ladies. This is a totally bonkers, violent, non-stop adrenaline-fueled extravaganza that has its female audience in mind just as much as its male audience. Yes. The female characters don't take a backseat in Fury Road, they're driving this bastard. I'm now kind of regretting my post from 2 days ago, here, in which I re-rated several movies I thought I'd given either too high or too low of a rating. I said that I think I sometimes rate new releases too highly, due partly to hype and partly to my enjoyment of the experience of going to a movie in the cinema. So now I've gone to the best movie I've seen in a very long time, and I'm still on a high as I'm writing this just after seeing it, and I know I'm going to just rave about it like an idiot and end up giving it a really high rating. Well, you can trust me on this. Fury Road is not a movie that will need re-rating because I've rated it too highly in my excitement. In fact, I'm afraid I won't do it justice and may rate it slightly too low, as I want to be more cautious with my ratings now. Damn. We'll see. I still don't know at this point what rating I'll give it. I always try to stay as spoiler-free as possible in my reviews, and I want to be especially careful with this one, as I think knowing as little as possible before seeing Fury Road may add to your enjoyment. I know it did for me, as I didn't know quite what to expect beyond the one trailer I'd seen. So, I'm not going to get very specific about things that happen in the movie, as I'm not sure what is common knowledge and what isn't. I think people will like this one whether they've seen the Mel Gibson films or not. My experience is this: I saw the first two, but I admit that, although I did really like them at the time, I only watched them once so many years ago that I don't remember them as well as I'd like. Sorry Mad Max fans, I'd wanted to re-watch them before seeing Fury Road but haven't had the time. I'll definitely make time for them again at some point now, but Fury Road works just fine as a film on its own. What I loved about Fury Road, besides the kick-ass female characters that I just can't rave about enough, was, well, everything. I loved the look and feel of the post-apocalyptic world and its insane inhabitants. I loved the action that never ever let up. The stunts they pulled off were amazing. My eyes couldn't actually keep up with the amount of action going on, it was nuts. But in a good way, I want to watch this again as I know I missed things. The writing was very good, we got decent character development, for an action movie, as well as sympathetic characters we cared about and who cared about each other, so many action movies barely bother with this. The baddies are over the top and outrageous in the most awesome way possible. Hell, the whole movie is over the top and outrageous, but it's so much damn fun. George Miller really went to town with Fury Road and it all works perfectly. It reminds me in a way of how Tarantino makes his films, you can tell there's a real love of what he does. It feels like he really put his heart into making this film. I wish every director would do the same. Mad Max, Fury Road is totally bonkers. Its fast pace may have you leaving the cinema wondering what the hell just hit you, but, hey, that's what action movies should be like. Fury Road gives us Imperator Furiosa, a new badass female who deserves a place among the likes of Ellen Ripley and The Bride. As a female who is often frustrated by the sexism and misogyny in movies, I couldn't be more happy about that, and the movie sure as shit passes the Bechdel test. I think those who aren't fans of the other Mad Max films should like this just as much as those who are, but those who are may be a little disappointed that this movie should almost be titled Furiosa and Mad Max, Fury Road. That title sounds damn good to me, though. Maybe we can get the female character's name in the title of the next one. From its opening scene, Mad Max, Fury Road grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. It is apologetically unrelenting, never letting its heroes, or the audience, stop to catch their breath. The film opens with a disheveled, bearded and clearly broken Max Rokitansky, Tom Hardy, wandering along a post-apocalyptic desert wasteland. He is haunted by his past, specifically his inability to save people in need. But he barely has time to sulk before he is captured by the war boys, working for Immortan Joe, Hugh Keaysburn, who take him back to their home to be used as a universal blood donor for their soldiers. Just as that is beginning to settle in, we see Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, who also works for Immortan Joe, going rogue during a supply run, veering off into the desert in her rig. Joe dispatches his soldiers to chase after Furiosa and Nux. Nicholas Hoult, the warboy getting blood from Max, decides to strap Max to the front of his vehicle so that he can continue to get blood while joining in on the chase. This leads, of course, to Max inadvertently being set free and stumbling across Furiosa, discovering that she ran in order to liberate Joe's young wives, one of whom is soon to give birth to his child. Max and Furiosa must settle into an uneasy partnership in order to both secure their freedom. That may sound like a lot to process, but all of that setup is thrown at you at a frenetic pace in a few brief opening scenes. And once the audience has enough information to track with the plot, the rest of the film is a 2-hour-long chase with the war boys never far behind Max, Furiosa, and the wives. The chase is brutal and intense. As an audience member, you never get much time to relax, which really connects you to the heroes in the story. Typically, action movies find points to slow down the pace in order to give you a breather and to fill you in on more character development and backstory. But writer/director George Miller has no interest in these quieter moments. Part of me wishes he had taken a bit more time to fill us in on a few more details. I got a sense of who all of the major players in the movie were and why I should care about them or despise them, but it was only a shallow understanding at best. I could tell Joe wasn't a good guy, but was never really offered many concrete details on the tyranny of his reign or how he amassed so much power. Similarly, I never got a full understanding of what Furiosa's role was in his regime, how she rose to a position of power and what made her finally decide to break free. While the lack of information was, at times, frustrating, I honestly didn't have much time to dwell on it since my eyes were constantly feasting on new and exciting action scenes. Obviously, in a film like this, action will always be more important than plot or character development, though action with no plot or character development ends up feeling hollow and boring, and Miller certainly delivers on the action front. Plus, the film is absolutely beautiful to look at. It takes place primarily in a desert with a limited color palette, but somehow Miller makes the whole thing look rich and vibrant. And every shot is wonderfully and intriguingly composed. Miller is constantly playing with space in the frame and with what is happening just off screen. It has the pacing and the chaos of a rock music video, but shot by a true auteur. Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy both give wonderful performances as the two leads, and I greatly enjoyed the two of them attempting to outmaneuver one another in their early interactions. There is a particularly fun scene in the very beginning where Max has a gun trained on all of the women and is wordlessly gesturing for them to hand over a never-ending cache of hidden weapons that he continues to find before they can be wielded against him. I also really enjoyed Nicholas Hoult's tragic performance as Nux and Riley Keough's charming portrayal of Capable, one of Joe's wives. It's worth noting that Keough, who is Elvis and Priscilla Presley's oldest grandchild, and Zoë Kravitz, the daughter of Lenny Kravitz and Lisa Bonet, both play Joe's wives in the film. And speaking of Joe, Hugh Keays-Byrne does some amazing scene chewing as the larger-than-life villain. Fun side note, scrolling through the cast list, you see how much fun Miller had with character names. Rictus Erectus, Cheeto the Fragile, the People Eater, the Doof Warrior and the Winchman are just a few of the colorful character titles used by Miller. Mad Max, Fury Road may not be the most complex or deep action film ever made, but what it lacks in backstory and character development it more than makes up for in style and action. And it is nice to see a big, explosive summer blockbuster filled with so many memorable and powerful heroines. So if you are craving a big, colorful action film, I highly recommend checking it out. Just make sure you take a Xanax first. Well, halfway into this movie I was just wondering how I was going to write this review. What was I going to say about this movie? Here it goes. I certainly was looking forward to the release of this movie, and was in desperate need for some chill time at the cinemas. It was well deserved. Mad Max surely isn't that popular as I thought it would be, considering that I shared the cinema hall with just about 8 other people. Maybe because there wasn't much hype or fuss about it here in Ghana. Nonetheless, I would doubt if anyone who has seen the pre-release trailers would dare say I am not interested in watching this movie. Trust me, those teaser trailers were enough to grab my attention months ago. Mad Max, Fury Road is a futuristic apocalyptic story set in a stark desert landscape where humanity is broken, and almost everyone is crazed fighting for the simple necessities of life. Following the story of 2 rebels on the run, who just might be able to help restore order. There's Max, who seeks peace of mind following the loss of his wife and child in the aftermath of the chaos. And Furiosa, a strong-willed woman trying to find her way back to her childhood homeland. It's easier for me to understand why this movie is a big deal because I have seen the earlier titles, so I kind of see the need for this reboot. And that gives me more appreciation for this movie. For starters, unlike most apocalyptic movies you might have seen, instead of the usual dry, dusty deserts, this one has a lot of color and depth. The directors did well to capture certain level of beauty in a dry wasteland. I loved every bit of the cinematography. Compared to the previous movies, you immediately feel the Midas touch of technology in the making of this movie. For the storyline itself, I would describe it as high-octane, full-throttle, action-packed and chaotic. Yes, right from the start to the very end, the entire storyline keeps an action sequence that doesn't slow down or dull you enough to change the vibe of the movie. The chaotic madness can in no way be classified as humorous at all. If you are thinking of going to laugh at this movie expecting some madness that would crack you up, forget it. It's all seriousness with a lot of explosions and daring stunts. Insane action that would literally blow you away and have you at the edge of your seat for the entire runtime. This is a huge step up from the earlier movies, exactly what it was meant to be, equally chaotic and horrific, yet more intense and breathtakingly exciting. In fact, at some point it becomes even difficult to keep up with the thrill, and you can't afford to blink, all for the fear for losing sight of any of the action. Oh. There is also the hard rock-fused score that just keeps your pulse rushing with adrenaline. If there is anything else that I love next to movies, it would be rock music and or Wadaki LOL, although it's cold, violent, and visceral, you can also feel the underlying elements of hope, loyalty, reverence and redemption. I am confident to say all those trailers and featurettes did promise and deliver for me. Besides the almost unnoticeable holes in the actual plot and backdrop of the movie, there also wasn't too much dialogue in the storyline, especially for the Max character. I feel this was all part of the maker's attempt at making him seem darker, confused and mysterious. I guess it worked even though I didn't like that. At some point I felt like the movie should have been titled Mad Furiosa instead. I was also expecting that the reboot would have started from before the apocalypse era like the first Mad Max, 1979, movie did. Maybe the makers would consider doing that as this revamped franchise kicks off and progresses. My only fear is that some people might get lost in all the chaos and confusion and may not give this title the appreciation it fully deserves. It's always refreshing for me to watch a movie as thrilling and entertaining as this was. Especially one that has come back from 30 years. I am now more interested in seeing how the follow-up sequels do as well. This is certainly time well spent. My chill time wasn't wasted at all going to see this movie. And I can't wait to see it again. I am scoring this first and foremost. I might be the only person in the world who were torn between Pitch Perfect 2 and Mad Max, Fury Road. You see, I loved Pitch Perfect. I had been waiting for the sequel for a while and Anna Kendrick is kind of my spirit animal. I have never even seen any of the Mad Max movies and know practically nothing about it except the broadest overview. I know, I'm a bad geek, and the trailers for Mad Max, Fury Road didn't quite move me. But then everyone and their grandfather started raving about Fury Road up to the point where I can't ignore it. As you might have guessed, after a brief moment of soul searching, I decided on Fury Road. And really, I basically dropped my jaw to floor for the whole 2 hours. It was insane. In a world where action movies, or even non-action movies, are frequently big and loud, Fury Road was big and loud. Fury Road was non-stop. It was basically 2 hours of Max's, Tom Hardy, life, and that life ain't quiet. But most importantly, it was also beautiful. A lot of movies are beautifully shot, but Fury Road brought everything to the next level. Every scene is like a painting. The movie didn't even have proper script, it had a mountain of storyboards instead, and it shows. Basically, Fury Road was an artwork. It wasn't just pretty, it was poetry. If poetry can be made of gasoline, greased wheels, and dirt, that can only brought upon by George Miller, the original creator of Mad Max. In Mad Max's world, the world had ended and the ones left were living under tyrant named Immortan Joe. I honestly don't know if he were supposed to have backstory in the previous movies or not, but I know jack shit about him and the War Boys, and I loved it. Fury Road has this enormously rich world where everything is crazy and nothing is explained, and actually I love that about the movie. It made me feel like we literally have only seen 1 second worth of glimpse at its madness, and looking at the amount of creativity in it, we definitely only have seen so little of its world. Every inch of its character designs told a story, and there were plenty of story to tell. Citadel, War Boys, and War Pups, Breeders, Gas Town, Bullet Farm, many mothers. We really are just scratching the surface. But the main spectacle were definitely the fights and chases, and boy, what a spectacle it was. Almost everything were done with practical effects instead of CGI, and you just can see the effort and detail that went into it. The cars were rigged with spikes, poles, and grenades, and you have never seen anything more beautiful than them. The chases were batshit crazy and complicated, that it made Fast and Furious 7's scenes looked like they were made with your niece's toy Lego cars. But honestly, as R-rated and artful as it is, we can't really deny that Fury Road is basically a 13-year-old's wet dream in which cars explode randomly on contact, and rock music during battle is the pinnacle of coolness. In short, it was nothing but full-on gloriousness. One thing, though, Charlize Theron was a capital B, bold letter badass. With a buzz cut and a war paint, Charlize Theron's Imperator Furiosa was a heroine worthy of Sigourney Weaver's Ripley status. Tom Hardy, who played the titular character, has always had enormous presence, and he was perfect as the wild but strangely rarely speaking Max. But it was Imperator Furiosa who moved the story forward. Trapped within action sequence after sequences, Theron was able to bring depth to her character, just enough to make we love her and want her to succeed. I also need to have a little shout out for Nicholas Hoult, who played Nux. Being a fan from his Skins days, I was always delighted to see him taking on a new, interesting character, and he did a marvelous job. We witness you, Nicholas Hoult, and we welcome you. It was really hard for me to remind myself that the original Mad Max, a cult favorite, is a 36-year-old property. Somehow, Mad Max, Fury Road felt so fresh, so breathtaking, and had eased itself to the cracks of today's filmmaking so completely that you know it wasn't a miracle, it wasn't luck, it was the work of a seasoned filmmaker who knew exactly what he's doing what he does best. I've never been a huge fan of the Mad Max movies. I've known of their existence, and I get all the references, having seen them all, at least once. I also appreciate their influence and impact on other media, and how the movies helped pave the way for the post-apocalyptic genre by providing a very bleak, but comical and creative outlook on humanity when the world has ended, dried up, and looks a lot like Australia. However, I can't remember the last time I sat and watched a Mad Max movie the whole way through. This disinterest in the franchise as a whole, however, did not prevent me from enjoying the newest entry, Mad Max, Fury Road. Directed by George Miller, the same director who started the Mad Max franchise, this feels like a pet project that was brought to life with the help of a big budget and 20 years worth of ideas. Say what you will of how loud, obnoxious, and visceral this movie is, there is a lot of creativity on display here, and it's hard to ignore. Despite this being called Mad Max, Fury Road, this isn't a movie about Max. Max is not the main character, and I think that works in its favor here. I would prefer if, in future films, they kept Max as a side character and a franchise name. His name lets the audience know the world we're going to see, while letting the plot and characters that are part of his world work on their own. We don't need to have his whole story told again for the risk of making his character a bloated device. Fury Road knows this and manages to establish his issues within the first few minutes for those who don't know him, then assigns him to a role as a prop for the next 20 minutes. The movie is really a struggle between the characters Furiosa and the local war boss, Immortan Joe. Max just happens to fall into the middle of their conflict and eventually chooses a side, but even then, it never takes the focus away from Furiosa. She's the main character of the movie and a satisfyingly badass female protagonist who isn't sexualized like Lara Croft or any of Milla Jovovich's recent action roles. She's cool, tough, and appropriate for the harsh and gritty world of Mad Max. What's more, she's an amputee, but she is not slowed down at all by it and is more than capable of defending herself and the cargo that she's transporting across the wasteland. I won't go into much further detail, as the experience benefits from you knowing very little about what's going on. The less you know, the more curious you might be, and thus able to notice all the little details and effort put into building a functioning culture in a fantastical future. Things like the architectural designs of Immortan Joe's fortress, the cult worship of a machine god, a religion that mimics those of Vikings, the use of chrome paint as a drug, etc., all add to the atmosphere of the universe they are building in Fury Road. We are given specific details of the culture of Joe's warband and small glimpses into others, which is one of the best methods of establishing a fictional universe. It gives the audience enough details to establish a particular area enough to give it a sense of realism, but the outside details provide a sense of something much bigger for these characters to inhabit. The details and world crafting help viewers become more immersed in what's taking place and help them give the benefit of the doubt more often. It also helps that the movie uses practical effects. Mad Max, Fury Road is a spectacle film with tons of action and explosions. The majority of the action is taking place on cars as they're moving, which only amplifies the tension and excitement of the scenes. And since most of it uses practical effects, it all looks really good. When a car blows up, it doesn't look like it was rendered in a computer. They're really exploding cars as they're driving and having pyrotechnics blow crap up around the stuntmen and actors. There are only a few moments where the action slows down, and you can take a moment to breathe again. I will say that the main problem I had with the movie was that, while I enjoyed the visual overload with all the colors and creative designs for the characters or their environment, I didn't care much for the auditory overload. Mad Max, Fury Road is unnecessarily loud, even if you turn the volume down on your TV. Sometimes, a person would be talking with the roars of the engines behind them, and what they said would be filled with the rattling noise of a speaker ready to blow out. I'd rather have clean and clear sound than gritty, distorted sound when I'm watching a movie, despite being a metalhead. Fury Road is meant to be watched with a big surround sound system, and for those who don't have that, just keep the volume and bass down to make sure your speakers survive the film. It took over 10 years for Mad Max to return to the big screen, originally set to hit theaters back in summer of 2004, and Mel Gibson was set to reprise his iconic role. Unfortunately, the filmmakers ran into some trouble securing locations and budget, and the film was put on hold. 11 years later, the new film is ready for prime time with a new cast and bigger budget. It never really implied, but Fury Road picks up right around the time when Beyond Thunderdome ended. Max, Tom Hardy, still has his long hair from the last film and wandering in the wasteland. Suddenly he's being chased by some awful-looking men and then gets captured. He's brought to another strange city called the Citadel. Here it's being ruled by a madman named Immortan Joe, Hugh Keays-Byrne, same actor who played the main villain in the original film, and his war boys. Max is being used as a blood transfurer to these war boys, and one of them, named Nux, Nicholas Hoult, takes advantage of that right away. Joe rules the city by giving water to its citizens, only few drops and false hope. Then we were introduced to Furiosa, Charlize Theron, who decided to betray Joe by stealing his wives to take them to a safer place called the Green Place. When Joe finds out, he and his war boys sets out to bring the wives back and kill Furiosa. During the chase, Max got caught in the middle and has no choice but to become a hero again. Anyone who have seen the previous films will know that this franchise isn't about deep plot, it's about action and lots of car/truck chases. If you want to see action, this is the movie to see. Just like last year's John Wick, this film never tried to be anything but a non-stop wall-to-wall action. George Miller staged some of the craziest and most brutal action sequences I've ever seen. Some of the stunts he shot were just mind-blowing, and best of all, he kept the cameras still and we, the audience, can see all the spectacular action sequences. But amidst all the chaos, he's still able to give each of the characters some screen time and we got to know their motivations. Kudos also go to the film's cinematographer John Seal. He shot the movie in digital and the picture looks amazing. I didn't see it in 3D, but clearly he and Miller shot the film with 3D in mind. The film's soundtrack by Junkie XL was quite amazing. The thundering sound definitely enhances the action scenes. Even though he only had a few lines of dialogues, Tom Hardy was very convincing as the brutal action hero. He shoots, punches, and kicks his enemies without hesitation. Clearly he's trying to differentiate his Max from that of Gibson's. Here Max is more of a brute while Gibson's version was more laid back and not as cold as Hardy. Theron on the other was marvelous as Furiosa. She's the best female action hero since Ripley in the Alien films. In fact, I think they should have named the movie Mad Max and Furiosa. She's as tough as Max and kicks some serious ass. There's a fight scene between her and Max that was quite fun to watch, and she could definitely handle herself. I actually think the movie was really about Furiosa since Max was just there to help out. Nicholas Hoult's character started out as a foe but then became part of the team, and I liked his character. We also got to know each of Joe's wives. They're not there to just be eye candy. As for Immortan Joe, well, he's just another one-note villain that's similar to Lord Humongous in the second film. Fans of the series will get a kick out this one new film, and maybe newcomers will enjoy it as well. I do recommend that you watch one of the previous films before going into this one if you've never seen the previous films, particularly Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. You need to familiarize yourself with the weird and crazy world that Miller has created. As a fan of the series and action films, I truly enjoy this tremendous action picture. If there's a theater in your area that has Dolby Atmos, I highly recommend you see it there. I plan to see it again in 3D, and hopefully it's as good as the first time I saw it. It's been a long time since we've shared some time with Max Rokitansky, formerly Mel Gibson, now Tom Hardy, and as this, the fourth film in the Mad Max saga, begins, we find that things really haven't gotten much better for our beleaguered anti-hero. He's been abducted by a tyrant called Immortan Joe, Hugh Keaysburn, and his army of warboys, and soon finds himself as the appointed bloodbag to one of them, Nux. Nicholas Hoult as Joe and his army go off in pursuit of Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, and the 5 breeders that she's attempting to rescue from Joe's clutches. But to even attempt to recap the fairly threadbare plot that writer/director George Miller presents here would be folly. Because Mad Max, Fury Road isn't really interested in telling us a story, it wants to show us a story. And it does exactly that. I ask that question because Mad Max, Fury Road is for all intent and purposes, a 2-hour car chase with an occasional break for some expository dialogue tossed in every so often. Make no mistake, there is a story being told here, but it's not told in the usual manner. It's told in the same way that Max describes his world, with fire and blood. The world that Max inhabits is one full of angry red, blue and gray skies. A world where all you can see is dry, arid sand for miles in any direction. A world where water is scarce, but pain and suffering is in ample supply. A world where the idea of hope is one left behind after awakening from whatever feverish dreams you might have once you arise from a restless sleep. As the film begins, with a manic chase scene that has the air of a Keystone Cops film, it's immediately obvious that Miller has no interest in giving Max a break in this installment. If anything, Miller's intent seems to be just how far he can push the limitations of the character before the whole thing turns into a parody of itself. Luckily, casting Hardy as Max turned out to be a stroke of genius. Hardy is something of a brute in the physical sense. He's not too tall, yet he's very imposing. What softens him are his eyes, which convey fear and understanding just as convincingly as they do sheer rage and anger, courtesy of the recurring visions of his dead daughter. Oddly enough, and despite the title, the film nearly makes Max a secondary character. It really belongs to Theron and the character of Imperator Furiosa, so much so that it could be retitled Mad Maxine, Fury Road, with no change to the story whatsoever. Furiosa is not only the smartest character in the film, but she's also the bravest and most noble one as well. Over the years, Theron has proven herself to be a very good actress, and I feel comfortable in saying that she's the best she's ever been here. She's this generation's Ellen Ripley, and with her raccoon eyes, shaved head and mechanical hand, she cuts an impressively visual picture as well. I would sincerely love to see the further adventures of Furiosa, sans Max. Miller wisely avoids any kind of romance betwixt Max and Furiosa. The movie would halt dead in its tracks if it attempted one. What his script does is have them develop a healthy respect for each other. Although the film is so absolutely bananas, there isn't any time for romance anyway. Immortan Joe's quest to recover his harem has nothing to do with any ideas of love for them. It's all about producing an heir to his throne for him, no romance. The idea of love for friends/family is completely alien to the inhabitants of this world, unlike the characters in another recent film that has a lot of cars racing across the screen. And trust me when I say that Vin Diesel and company can learn something about being fast and furious from this film. Mad Max, Fury Road takes absolutely no prisoners in its quest to completely overwhelm its audience with stunning set piece after set piece. The carnage on display is like nothing you've ever seen before in its relentless desire to run you over and over and over again. But therein lies the biggest problem I have with it. In the quest to club its audience into submission, it slowly becomes victim to its largesse. As it outdoes itself every 10 minutes or so with bigger and bigger action scenes, it had a numbing experience on me. Perhaps I'm getting a bit too long in the tooth for this sort of thing, but after a while I just didn't see too much variation from scene to scene. The whole experience became an angry red blur to me, with a horde of bald men screaming incoherently at each other. I calculated that, after a brief opening monologue, the film ran nearly 75 minutes before it stopped to have some meaningful dialogue between characters. 75 minutes of that same angry red blur, and incoherent screaming before it slowed down for about 5 minutes, then it just fired itself back up again. It was as if Miller realized that something hadn't exploded for a few minutes and took immediate measures to correct that. I've never been accused of being a prude or proper, but 75 minutes is a long time to sit and watch cars blow up all pretty like, and there's still 45 minutes to go before it all ends. It's all just a bit too much for my liking. But that isn't to say that I disliked the experience, far from it. There are moments from the film that'll remain seared into my psyche for a long time. I was especially fond of the cars with the giant metronomes attached to them, and it's gonna be a long time before anyone, besides Miller that is, might ever hope to beat out the sheer virtuosity on display here. The fact that the production eschewed CGI for the most part is especially impressive. The stunts you see on screen are real ones, little to no computer enhancement at all. As far as the other performances go, I don't think a film filled with characters that have names like Toast the Knowing, Zoë Kravitz, the splendid Ung Harrod, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, Capable, Riley Keough, and Rictus Erectus, Nathan Jones, among others, is looking to make its mark with great performances, and as there isn't all too much dialogue here to begin with, the assorted unintelligible grunts and groans work just fine. Hardy and Theron do all of the heavy lifting acting-wise anyway. It all ends with a subtle nod to the finale of The Road Warrior, 1981, and although it's certainly open to another sequel, I hope Miller and company don't wait another 30 years to fashion it. Although I have my issues with its pacing, there's no denying that Mad Max, Fury Road is the most action-packed, deliriously demented and breathtakingly visual adventure of the year. If you enjoy this sort of thing, then there's no way you won't come away from it dissatisfied. And even if extreme vehicular carnage isn't your particular bag, you're gonna be seriously impressed by it. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if a few of you come away from it wondering what all of the hoopla is about. Mad Max, Fury Road, 2015, directed by George Miller. Starring Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult. IMDb says, in a stark desert landscape where humanity is broken, two rebels just might be able to restore order, Max, a man of action and of few words, and Furiosa, a woman of action who is looking to make it back to her childhood homeland. Mad Max, Fury Road is a movie that will embody all of the adjectives it's slammed with to the fullest extent. I can say that it's an audacious spectacle, but the weight of those words doesn't come close to the reality. It's crazy in a way that it shouldn't be nearly as relatable or as universally likable as it is, but its madness is endearing and something we have been missing from a theater experience. Fury Road is exactly what the summer blockbuster season needs. Even with the movie's franchise background, it's so peculiar and incredibly bizarre that it doesn't feel like it's rehashing anything. It feels original and different in a way that no blockbuster has in quite some time. I didn't realize how much I missed that feeling. That feeling of discovery, that feeling of genuine surprise. While Fury Road is essentially a road movie disguised as a car chase action flick, the core plotline is a bit more intriguing than one might expect. Main character Max, Tom Hardy, is a man driven solely by survival instinct and troubled by both past regrets and present dangers. Through a series of ludicrous events, Max crosses paths with the equally conflicted Furiosa, Charlize Theron, who is on a mission to help a group of enslaved women escape the rule of Immortanjo, the dictator of the Citadel, one of the world's last remaining communities. Furiosa is a character that turns out to be every bit an equal to Max both in story and in the pain delivery / badass department. This is a welcome surprise to the standard action movie narrative that allows the viewer to root for the pair to join forces against a bigger evil. But are we here for the post-apocalyptic struggle? Maybe. But the drama takes a backseat to the glorious action. Everything in Fury Road is so visually arresting and utterly bizarre, yet the movie still manages to walk a seemingly impossible line of realistic drama and pure insanity. Praise here goes to director George Miller's all-encompassing vision of this broken world that is incredibly detailed at every possible visual opportunity. Whether it's an extra's deformity seen in a crowd or a mind-boggling weapon attached to a car, there is always something grabbing you and demanding your attention. It's explosions and severed limbs and heavy metal, and it's awesome. I have to urge everyone to check out Mad Max, Fury Road in theaters. If you miss it, then maybe you should re-evaluate your life goals. Although I also have to issue a warning, please be advised that you will leave the theater with a sudden desire to murder people with your car, add spikes to your door panels and shave your head. 2015 has been shaping up to be a stellar year at the movies. Marvel/Disney hit it out of the park, in my opinion, with their latest addition to their cinematic universe, namely Avengers: Age of Ultron. Neil Blomkamp gave us a bizarrely violent mashup of Short Circuit and RoboCop with Chappie, and aging director George Miller came out of nowhere with the action tour de force Mad Max, Fury Road. For years I heard that a new Mad Max film was on its way, and I had all but given up hope until I finally started seeing trailers and promotional materials on the web. I was immediately hooked, especially after discovering that this film was going to be massively old school. Yes, there is a good chunk of CGI in Mad Max, Fury Road, but much of the stunts and effects are all practical. With that in mind, having seen this film numerous times, I can't help but wonder if there's a mass grave of stuntmen hidden somewhere in the deserts of Namibia. Set sometime after the events of Mad Max, Beyond Thunderdome, I think, honestly even George Miller can't pin down where this film occurs in the series. Our post-apocalyptic antihero is captured by the Half-Life War Boys, the fanatical troops of the film's villain, Immortan Joe, the toe cutter himself, Hugh Keays-Byrne. Kept alive to serve as a universal blood donor, Max is eventually carted off to be the mobile blood bag for a warboy named Nux, Nicholas Hoult. Immortan Joe has rallied his men and departed from his home base called the Citadel, because one of his trusted warriors, Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, has stolen something precious to him and made a run for it. It eventually turns out that she has carted off Joe's mini harem of birthers, young, beautiful, healthy women who are carrying his unborn children. Max eventually escapes from his captors, and joins Furiosa to keep ahead of the combined war parties of Immortan Joe, and his allies from Gastown and the Bullet Farm. And that's your entire plot, ladies and gentlemen, because the rest of movie is just a series of bone-jarring, adrenaline-pumping action sequences. Bodies are hurled like ragdolls through the air as post-apocalyptic jalopies crash, flip, and explode in a parade of beautifully orchestrated vehicular carnage. And just when you think that the movie's action scenes have finally reached their zenith, Miller manages to up the ante. Mad Max, Fury Road is an exciting film that left me completely drained after my initial viewing of it. I was physically exhausted after watching Miller's twisted metal masterpiece, and yet, I wanted more. It's an extremely satisfying film that takes place in a fully realized world. There are different factions surviving across the post-apocalyptic landscape, each with their own distinctive war machines, battle tactics, leaders, economies, and politics. The film is further enriched by all the fun and bizarre characters that thrive in Max's world. Guitar-playing Duke Warrior has rapidly become a fan favorite. Hugh Keays-Byrne's Immortan Joe is a great villain, who is single-minded in his quest to regain the slave girls he considers to be his property. He is unrelenting, and looks cool as hell within his toothy breathing apparatus. Charlize Theron is fantastic as the film's main antagonist, the tough-as-nails Furiosa. She suffered a great deal and yearns to regain her freedom, by returning to the green place, a lush, green paradise that she was taken from as a child. Also great is Nicholas Hoult, who plays the fanatical Nux. Initially just an insanely suicidal minion in Immortan Joe's army, Nux eventually has a change of heart and ends up sacrificing himself to save his newfound friends. And then there's Max himself, played rather quietly by Tom Hardy. I liked Hardy as the new Max Rokitansky, and found his character to be rather interesting. Max is literally going mad as the film progresses, as he is constantly hearing voices and hallucinating. These visions that he suffers from seem to be the result of the crushing grief he feels at not being able to save his family and friends in the past. Oddly enough, the repeated hallucination of a little girl, his daughter from another mother perhaps, actually prepares him to instinctively block a fatal crossbow bolt to the face. Though Mad Max is the title character of the film, it's Charlize Theron's Furiosa that is the focus of the story. But don't believe for a moment that he doesn't play an integral role in the proceedings. Max kicks ass. He nonchalantly takes out pursuers, and is regarded to be so dangerous and feral by his captors, that he spends the first quarter of the film chained and muzzled. He's quick to react, and his survival instincts carry him and the other protagonists through one of the deadliest desert car chases in film history. If I have any issues with Mad Max, Fury Road, they are few and fleeting. The movie is exciting, and though it makes callbacks to previous films, it does its own thing. It feels like a natural progression for the franchise. The original Mad Max was a classic revenge tale that leaves our main character a broken man by its climax. The Road Warrior sees him go from a cold-hearted opportunist, to a man that regains enough of his humanity to do the right thing, leading to one of the greatest chase scenes in cinematic history. Though in the end, he gets a pretty raw deal. In Mad Max, Beyond Thunderdome, Max has become oddly kid-friendly, and uses his skills to become the savior of a clan of desert children. It was a really strange direction for the series to go in, but you can chalk that up to studio interference, and a depressed George Miller who initially didn't have much interest in even making the movie. But thankfully Fury Road is, in many ways, a return to form. Max is once again a nomadic loner, wandering the wastelands of the earth, and running from his personal demons. Though he feels he can survive better on his own, and most likely doesn't want to bear the responsibility of anyone's life, or death, Max grudgingly throws in with Furiosa and her cohorts. Their path eventually leads them to some hard truths, resulting in a veritable death race through the scorched deserts of the future, back towards the Citadel. Along the way, cars blow up, numerous people die, all while our main protagonists seek, and to a certain degree, attain, their own personal redemption. Mad Max, Fury Road is a visual feast that easily outshines the bulk of action films being made today. At 70 years old, George Miller has still got it, and I cannot wait to see what else he has in store for us. Mad Max, The Wasteland, if rumors are correct. I truly loved this film, which is getting unnecessary backlash from male rights activists. Wait, that's a thing, and it's easily my favorite movie of 2015. I chose to watch Mad Max, Fury Road because this flick was recommended to me numerous times by friends and family. Plus with its attainment of an enormity of awards, I wanted to know if it was worth the frenzied hype. Directed by George Miller, Mad Max, Fury Road takes place during post-apocalyptic times. Years after the collapse of civilization, tyrannical Immortan Joe now keeps a supply of water, shelter, and food all to himself, enslaving other survivors inside a desert fortress, the Citadel, in the process. When warrior Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, decides to help Immortan Joe's 5 wives, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, Zoë Kravitz, Riley Keough, Courtney Eaton, Abby Lee Kershaw, escape, she forges an alliance with former captive, Max Rokitansky, Tom Hardy. Aided with their trusty, armored truck and an heirloom of weaponry, the survivors try to outrun the ruthless warlord and his henchmen in a deadly high-speed chase through the wasteland. Throughout watching this flick, I couldn't help but be awed by its costume, makeup, and set design. It was all very unique, tribal, punkish, and perfectly incorporated the rugged ruthlessness and discord of humanity's deprived, degenerated state. And the drummer boy that's swinging around the enemy's speeding vehicle while playing his own little solo rock concert with a flamethrower guitar? Epically badass. Probably one of the best things to watch. And for other fellow watchers, was it just me, or did Mad Max, Fury Road kinda remind you of Naughty Dog's 2004 PS2 game, Jak 3? Another positive aspect of the adventure sci-fi was the sound mixing and editing. While watching it on my old, portable DVD player, I initially thought it had magically enhanced itself via an upgrade or something before realizing it was the film itself, the sound of revving engines, explosions, etc. That incredible and beautiful, laughing face. From the sound of sanding crumbling to the revving of engines, Miller's flick is a dream come true for those obsessed with random sounds. Now, before you roll your eyes and go, great, dudes fighting to kick each other's asses, there's actually something that some of you feminists will enjoy, Imperator Furiosa. Furiosa isn't a weakling, but a woman who has broad knowledge of guns, combat, and kicking ass. But what's great is that Miller doesn't just depict Imperator Furiosa as a killing machine, she's also human. Charlize Theron especially does a good job in revealing a sliver of a softer, compassionate side as opposed to her character's debut of a rough, scarred woman. Furthermore, a lot of the girls featured, pregnancy slaves, actually made an effort to fight back and break free rather than the cliched damsels in distress curling up in the corner. Yay for more female lead roles without making them look like brutish, Viking Helgas. Moving on to the cinematography, wow, I mean wow. For a lifeless, dead world, Miller is somehow able to make colors seem bright and beautiful, especially the contrast of golden sand and the cerulean blue of the sky. Despite literally only hills of sand being present the entire film, the landscape is strangely beautiful. And those continual panoramic view shots? That is some skilled camera work. The action is ongoing literally during the entire duration of the film, perfect for action lovers. Nearly every single scene includes shots, explosions, etc. But then again, that's because the flick is entirely supported by a blazing high-speed car chase. So if your buddy has ever complained about a movie being complete bore due to the absence of violence and action, force your weirdo to watch this, they won't have enough. Having said that, in today's world of CGI overload, Mad Max, Fury Road also trumps the majority of Hollywood's action films in its glorious, practical action effects. The violence in this film is also great because it isn't too excessive or gory, yet it perfectly stimulates your imagination and implies a shivering brutality whenever one of the characters is KO'd for good. I'm not saying that I hate gore, Final Destination lover here, but for a film like this, they didn't include unnecessary, redundant shots of guts spilling out which would allow its viewers to adapt to the violence and usurp the film's pivotal aspect of its character's brutality. Here, the violence is tastefully incorporated. Now onto the one thing that could have been better, the plot. I'm really sorry to say, but it was thin and terrible. The entire thing was literally a car chase, cars going boom boom, really? It was kind of funny though, since while initially watching this, I was thinking wow, this chase scene is so long, the pacing really sucks, before realizing that was the entire film. The storyline was also way too generic and boring when comparing it to other flicks in the post-apocalyptic genres. So for a visually stunning movie to get dragged down by its mediocre plot. You could guess how disappointed I am that the film had excelled in every single other category except for plot. All in all, I initially thought Mad Max, Fury Road was extremely overrated. But after thinking about it, here's the thing, your satisfaction of the film depends on what you were looking for. If you're the type of person to really care about the plot, you might be disappointed. But if you're the type of person to care more about the action, or even the majority of categories it did superb in other than the plot, you might overlook its story. George Miller's Mad Max, Fury Road performs exactly what its intended audience demands. Essentially a cartoonish 2-hour car chase brimming with violent badassery, Fury Road precludes any real criticism. Poking at the weak dialogue, cardboard characterizations, and muddled motivations would miss the point. Fury Road looks amazing. It's thrilling. It's violent. It does what it was made to do. It's a spectacular entertainment. Spectacular in the guide aboard sense. Those who would contend there's more to Fury Road, that would protest I'm missing some depth here, might refer me to the film's feminist motifs. Yes, this is a film that critiques and rebels against patriarchal authority, going so far as to spell out its message in big block letters even. Maybe there's a Freudian or Lacanian analysis in there too. Charlize Theron's Imperator Furiosa, she's the real star of the film. Tom Hardy's Max is a bland substitute for old crazy eyes Mel, shorn of both hair and an arm, castration symbols, no, driving an enormous phallus, one dangling a big testicle full of fuel, power, no less, across the desert wastes, plunging it violently ahead to save some concubines. Their eminence derives from their non-mutant genes and marvelous cheekbones like Zack Snyder's 300. Fury Road always privileges ideal body types over aberrations. The film has been nearly universally praised, as a quick tour through the aggregator site Rotten Tomatoes shows. I'll lazily pull from RT's poll quotes lazily, this movie will melt your face off, promises Christy Lemire. Okay. For David Adelstein, seeing the film a second time became about digging the spectacle, not to mention the hilarious sexual politics. Were they really hilarious? An A+B movie that at times feels almost like a tone poem to early-ADS-XS, writes Christopher Orr, who may or may not know what a tone poem is. Mark Kermode, a crank whom I generally admire, calls it an orgy of loud and louder, leaving us alternately exhilarated, exasperated, and exhausted. I stuffed these quips in here to show how Fury Road precludes any real criticism. Like I said up front, it does what it intends to do, and what it intends to do is show us something wholly familiar in a way that makes us think that we are not seeing something wholly familiar. But for me, anyway, Fury Road does feel familiar, like any number of movies I've already seen. Maybe blame it on Miller's earlier Mad Max films. Maybe they colonized our cultural imagination so much that any strangeness in Fury Road is difficult to glean, hence the filmmaker's central trick, speed the damn thing up. Less character development, less bothersome talking. I cherry tomato picked the Kermode quote above, but his full review is more measured and insightful than that quote alone suggests. He ends with a warning, at 2 hours it's more of a slog, battle fatigue teetering on the edge of burnout and even boredom. Reader, I'll admit to that boredom. The first edges of that boredom actually creep in early, when we see how little is actually at stake in the film. Miller's gambit is to keep Max constrained for the first quarter of the film, bound, chained, even muzzled. Tied to the prow of a rumbling car like some mythic figure, Max is relentlessly imperiled by spears and bullets and an apocalyptic sandstorm. But like some mythic figure, we know he'll never die. Like the Roadrunner cartoons it so closely resembles, Fury Road imagines a slapstick world of zany cause and effect non-logic, producing kinetic anxieties in its audience that are ultimately relieved, over and over again, with a belief so strong that it cannot be suspended: Max will not die. Max can never die. There must be a sequel. Max persuades Furiosa and the surviving course Max won't be sticking around for that. He and Furiosa share a cliched nod, shorthand for "hey, I understand you and you understand me," and Max, who has done everything he can to survive up to this point, turns to leave. To leave water, food, and stability. He doesn't even stick around to heal or get a better ride and outfit for his service. The moment that a feminine, and tacitly maternal, order reifies a civilization presumably not entirely figured on infanticidal predation, Max leaves. I think here of the last words of Mark Twain's novel Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, where Huck promises to light out for the territory ahead of the rest, because Aunt Sally she's going to adopt me and civilize me, and I can't stand it. I've been there before. And that's the fantasy, I suppose, promised in the post-apocalyptic and dystopian narratives that have become mainstream now, the fantasy of new territory outside of civilization, to borrow Huck's phrasing. One big do-over. Yet Max, after securing Civilization's reboot, will not remain to partake, but rather departs into the salt and sand that he has warned others against, bound for new adventures, new reboots. Another sequel. I have long come to the conclusion that action movies are not exactly my cup of tea. Maybe it's because I have not been subjected to this particular genre at an early age as much as to other genres. I have, for the most part, not made the formative experience of defying official age restrictions to see the latest action blockbuster in the cinema with my primary school friends. Outlandish explosions and frantic chase scenes do not seem to have a profound effect on my adrenaline levels. I like Terminator 2 mainly because of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Marvel movies excite me because the characters are memorable. The appeal of the James Bond franchise is lost on me. And yet, I went to see Mad Max, Fury Road, the fourth entry into George Miller's series of dystopian vehicular action films, following Mad Max, 1979, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, 1981, and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, 1985, twice. To say that it has turned me into an action convert would be an overstatement. If anything, the two viewings showed me that my adrenaline can be lamentably unresponsive even at the best of times. But that does not take away from the fact that Fury Road is one of the most awe-inspiring, most audacious films of the year. While a case can be made that Australian cinema came of age with Mad Max, its third sequel might just prove to be another landmark. George Miller, whose directing filmography is interspersed with decidedly harmonious fare, Lorenzo's Oil, Babe, Pig in the City, Happy Feet, brings its predecessor's depiction of faltering masculinity to its logical conclusion, blowing off the chauvinistic dust from the action genre as a whole and wrenching it into the 21st century. Mad Max Rocketinsky, played by Tom Hardy, who replaces the iconic Mel Gibson, is all but useless as the lone hero figure here, slowly succumbing to trauma and isolation in the vastness of a post-apocalyptic wasteland one may or may not take to be the Australian outback. Fury Road opens with him being captured and turned into a human blood bag by the Kamikaze War Boys, the sickly army of desert tyrant and cult leader Immortan Joe, Hugh Keays-Byrne. Thus, Max is immobilized for a fair portion of the movie, either suspended upside down in a cage or tied to the hood of a War Boys, Nicholas Hoult, beefed-up car, ceding the role of the protagonist to one-armed Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, a rogue ally of Joe's, who has stolen the dictator's favorite breeding wives, which prompts him and his cavalcade of pursuit vehicles to chase the women through the desert. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about this film is how matter-of-factly it subverts decades, if not centuries, of gendered narratives. Although he eventually joins Furiosa and the wives, the splendid Angharad, Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, miles away from the demeaning role she played in Transformers, Dark of the Moon, Toast the Knowing, Zoe Kravitz, Capable, Riley Keough, The Dag, Abby Lee, and Cheeto the Fragile, Courtney Eaton. Max never becomes a knight in shining armor who is the damsel's only hope of survival. In the end, he even takes up the role of the healer, which is conventionally reserved for female characters. Not only does the power to advance the getaway vehicle, a sizable war rig, and thus the plot, lie firmly in the hands of Furiosa, her human cargo, each of them a distinct individual with her own characteristics, is never really in need of being saved. Once they have left behind the patriarchal oppression of Immortan Joe's citadel, they are not prizes to be won, as has been the case in countless works of male-dominated storytelling, but active, at-risk agents in a story that does not put them in a subordinated, doted-over position. Romance, too, is almost entirely absent from Fury Road. There is no ham-fisted spontaneous blossoming of feeling between Max and Furiosa, whose relationship is marked by mutual respect and pragmatic partnership only. With the help of the Vagina Monologues playwright Eve Ensler, who served as a consultant during the screenwriting process, Miller has constructed a rousingly feminist narrative that seems to rest on two very simple ideological pillars: women are not things, a truth the action genre at large still seems hesitant to embrace fully, and gender relations are a cooperative. The fact that this message has caused an uproar among the infamous, and sadly rather numerous, men's rights activists underlines both the validity and the importance of Miller's film. But this rich feminist subtext, which never degenerates into a sermon, is by no means the only reason why Fury Road deserves all the praise it has received over the past month or so. Apart from its topical prowess, the film could serve as a lesson for how to conceive, direct, and shoot an action movie. This is kinetic cinema at its finest and purest, blending the legacy of the American Western, with its single-minded chases through the empty plains of the frontier, with the breakneck speed and sheer preposterousness of a Road Runner cartoon. Over the course of 2 high-octane hours, Miller conducts a veritable orchestra of car crashes and explosions, enhanced by CGI, but fabricated by old-fashioned pyrotechnics in the presence of daring stunt personnel, each carefully crafted set piece fulfilling a designated purpose in the cohesive fabric of the whole. In its breathless simplicity, Mad Max, Fury Road truly creates the atmosphere of a post-apocalyptic world where conversations are sparse and to the point. Both Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron excel at conveying multiple layers of emotions through looks, grunts, and shouts alone, where the action, in the form of revving up V8 motors, literally speaks louder than words. Miller peoples this dystopia with a wide array of arresting characters, Furiosa and the wives being only the tip of the iceberg, from an operatic warlord, Richard Carter, and a motorcycle gang comprised mainly of older women to a blind warboy playing an unmistakably phallic double-neck guitar that spits fire. It's a dizzying piece of action craftsmanship where creativity abounds, where the sumptuous oranges and blues of D.P. John Seale's compositions reign, where one becomes engulfed by the hypnotic soundscape of running motors and Tom Holkenborg's aka Junkie XL's archaic score. This is one hell of a ride, indeed. George Miller's Mad Max films didn't just make Mel Gibson a star, they completely transformed post-apocalyptic entertainment with their visceral stunt work and singular vision of an increasingly desperate future. 3 decades after the last film, the oft-maligned Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Miller finally returns to this desolate landscape for the highly anticipated Mad Max, Fury Road, recasting the title role in the grizzled visage of Tom Hardy and upping the stakes with promises of vehicular mayhem on a level commensurate with what modern CGI audiences have come to expect. From its very first scenes, Fury Road vibrates with the energy of a veteran filmmaker working at the top of his game, pushing us forward without the cheap special effects or paper-thin characters that have so often defined the modern summer blockbuster. Miller hasn't just returned with a new installment in a money-making franchise. The man who rewrote the rules of the post-apocalyptic action genre has returned to show a generation of filmmakers how they've been stumbling in their attempts to follow in his footsteps. Who was more crazy? Me, or everyone else? In Mad Max, Fury Road, Miller has pushed his Gilliam-esque vision of a world gone mad to its logical extreme. No longer are the people of Max Rokitansky's world merely scavengers for oil or power, they have been transformed into creatures of circumstance, either left with one defining need or left without any semblance of reason. Fury Road is a violent film, but the violent acts in this world don't feel like arbitrary action beats, they emerge from a complete lack of other options or a firm sense of straight-up insanity. Miller's new vision of Max isn't a warrior. Rather, he's a man driven by the memories of past sins to do little more than survive. He walks with the ghosts of those he couldn't save, and his traveling companions have pushed him to the brink of sanity. While wandering at this edge, Max is kidnapped and transformed into a literal blood bag for a feral warrior named Nux, Nicholas Hoult, who serves the whims of his maniacal ruler, Immortan Joe, Hugh Keays-Byrne, who also played the villain Toe Cutter in the original Mad Max. From the start, Miller gives you no time to ease into this world or the story he wants to tell. The frame rate is accelerated, the editing is hyperactive, the bad guy speaks through a mask that makes half his dialogue indecipherable, shades of Hardy's Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, and the horrific visions of Miller's twisted future come fast and furious. Immortan Joe is a barely alive freak of nature, kept breathing by tubes connected to his face and served by similarly disfigured half-humans with definitive names like Rictus Erectus, Nathan Jones, and the People Eater, John Howard. One of Joe's most notable warriors is a powerful woman known as Imperator Furiosa, Charlize Theron, who, as the film opens, is leading a convoy from Immortan Joe's citadel to the oil refinery gas town when she deviates off course. It turns out that Furiosa has kidnapped Joe's breeders, the women he keeps prisoner in an effort to create a male heir. She's taking them to the green place, to safety. Of course, Joe sends his men after Furiosa including Nux, to whom Max is still attached, and the rest of Mad Max, Fury Road consists of one long sustained chase across the unforgiving desert. With the exception of one centerpiece of dialogue, the film takes place almost entirely on the move, speeding, chasing, bouncing, and exploding across Miller's scorched landscape. As a reflection of more desperate times, Miller has updated the needs of his future world from commodities like oil to pure survival. Max has been reimagined as a fighting, driving machine, a man who finds his own way, moving forward in an attempt to outrun his ghosts. Nux is a brainwashed goon, a man-creature who believes that he will die and be reborn after sacrificing himself for a trip to Valhalla. Max eventually steps into the role of the action hero, but, in one of his most daring moves, Miller gives the weight of the narrative to Furiosa, a woman who holds on to the only thing that could possibly give her hope in this violent world: the next generation. Theron does arguably the best work of her career here, artfully conveying the drive in Furiosa's soul in a way that fuels the entire film. She does more with a searing stare or clenched jaw than most actresses could with a page of dialogue. And one shouldn't undervalue the empowerment message at the heart of this film. Evensler, author of The Vagina Monologues, consulted with Miller on the script, which suggests that women, as the creators of new life, will, inherently, always be the gender that holds hardest onto hope for the future. Furiosa looks at the insanity of the male leadership around her and decides enough is enough. When one of Furiosa's wards goes into labor and still defends herself and her yet-to-be-born child, after being shot no less, it's hard not to see Fury Road as an answer to the macho nonsense that so often defines the action genre. But none of that should remotely imply that the action here is lost in the message. The pacing, the sound design, the editing, the music, courtesy of Junkie XL and some of Joe's freaks who play drums and electric guitars during the action, and even the emotional stakes are all so far above average that they make just about any other car chase movie look like a quaint Sunday drive by comparison. The first chase in Fury Road, as Joe's men catch up to Furiosa and her precious cargo, is one of the most remarkable action sequences in film history. And that's really just a warm-up. It's no exaggeration to say that, if you think something in Fury Road is the most breathtaking action stunt you've seen in years, you really need only wait a few minutes to see something better. This is a movie where you keep thinking that it's reached its apex and then, inexplicably, that moment is left behind in the dust. From the very beginning, Miller and his team do something that so many other filmmakers fail to do: they define the geography of their action. Rather than merely tossing the camera around in the vain hopes of creating tension, they constantly give the viewer overhead shots and clear physical dimensions of what's happening and where we're going. And then they blow it all up. There are dozens of crashes, explosions, and flying bodies in Fury Road, and yet the piece never gets repetitive, especially as the emotional stakes increase with each sequence. Miller knows when to let the pace coast when it needs to, which is rarely, and then he pushes the pedal down and plasters you to your seat. Mad Max, Fury Road is an action film about redemption and revolution. Never content to merely repeat what he's done before, even the first three Mad Max have very distinct personalities. Miller has redefined his vision of the future yet again, vibrantly imagining a world in which men have become the pawns of insane leaders and women hold fiercely onto the last vestiges of hope. Fury Road would be remarkable enough as a pure technical accomplishment, a film that laughs in the face of blockbuster CGI orgies with some of the best editing and sound design the genre has ever seen, and yet Miller reaches for something greater than technical prowess. He holds aloft the action template that he created with The Road Warrior and argues that Hollywood shouldn't have been copying it for the past 3 decades, they should have been building on it. Fury Road is a challenge to a whole generation of action filmmakers, urging them to follow its audacious path into the genre's future and, like Miller, try their hardest to create something new. This film, directed by George Miller, written by George Miller, based on characters, produced by Doug Mitchell, starring Charlize Theron, cinematography John Seal, edited by Margaret Sixel, music by Junkie XL. Production companies Village Roadshow Pictures. Distributed by Roadshow Entertainment. Release dates May 7, 2015. Running time 120 minutes. Countries United States. Language English. Budget $154.6 to $185.1 million. Box office $380.4 million.